Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to create content for you that will help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. And this video is all about looking at some of the biggest triggers for binge eating and what to do about them. Because in the moment when you've been triggered by something, quite often there doesn't seem to be time to react. You're in it before you even know it. So by thinking about these triggers and what to do in advance, you stand a much better chance of finding a different way to respond if you're confronted with one of these triggers. So one of the first one that comes up a lot is feeling full. So many people say to me, I remember it myself, that feeling of fullness then triggering off this desire for more. It seems to like ignite an insatiable appetite for binging for certain foods and whatever. And I think that feeling full has got a really bad rap. You know, our diet mentality will tell us that feeling full is not a good thing. If you're feeling full, you've eaten too much. So then believing that you've eaten too much kind of goes into that, well, I might as well keep eating. But I want to say that we are supposed to feel full when we eat. When we eat something, we want to satiate our hunger in the moment, but we also want to see ourselves through till the next time that we eat. So if we stop eating the second our physical hunger vanishes, we're going to feel hungry again in a couple of hours' time, maybe less than that. And then we're going to be telling ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling hungry this soon because we ate a couple of hours ago. And I can remember when I was still in a really difficult place with food, going out for breakfast one morning and feeling full after my breakfast. But I'd really enjoyed it, and I remember feeling full and having that flicker of wanting to go and have something sweet, which would have been a slippery slope. It was an urge that didn't feel, it didn't feel good. It felt like a compulsive urge to go and buy something sweet. And I took a moment. I don't know where this came from. It seemed to kind of come out of the blue in some way. I took a moment to think, actually, maybe this could feel quite nice being full. That kind of having some food in your stomach, feeling that you've got energy in you, that your body is breaking down and getting everything that you need out of it. And you don't need to think about food for a while. If you feel full and satisfied when you eat, you're less likely to want to reach for other things as well. So to manage this trigger, I would urge you to make friends with feeling full and to just appreciate that feeling of fullness, because when it's not feeling stuffed, when it's not painful and uncomfortable, it can actually feel really, really nice if we're not telling ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling like this. And the next one is eating something that you believe that you shouldn't. So what are your food rules? What are the foods that you see as bad foods, the foods that you believe that you shouldn't be eating or you should only be eating at certain times? Feeling like you've broken a rule triggers that all or nothing thinking. And it's tied in with perfectionism as well. So if you're someone who is, my eating has to look this way, and you put this tight frame around how you believe you should be eating and what and how much you believe you should be eating, then when that frame breaks, it's going to turn into chaos. So it's this like binding yourself up with these rules and then having something you believe you shouldn't have, and then using that as this window of opportunity to eat everything that you believe you shouldn't have. So what's the answer to this one? Well, the problem with this one is the focus on what you're eating instead of why you're eating. So what you eat is the outcome of your food decisions, and the way you make food decisions is based on how you're thinking and feeling at the time. So I think I use this example a lot, and I think I've used it in a video already, so forgive me for repeating myself, but it's like if you go to a party on a Saturday night and they have cake, and it is the most delicious cake you have ever had. You enjoy it so much, and everyone else is raving about the cake and other people are having a second slice, and you have 2 slices of cake. Compared to on another Saturday night where you're sitting at home on your own and you're feeling sad and you have 2 slices of cake just because you're feeling sad and low. The behaviour is the same. The food that you ate is the same. You ate 2 slices of cake on both occasions, but the reasons were very different. So when we bring our attention back to the reasons why we're eating something, you know, are we reaching for binge foods because we're bored or because we're uncomfortable? If so, we may not like those reasons rather than focusing on what the food is that we're reaching for. So this reflection, this wondering, when you have an eating episode and you feel really unhappy with it, to kind of trace your mind back. What were the reasons? Because if we get your reasons, if we get the decision-making process right, then the outcome will take care of itself. We don't have to worry about that so much. And the third one, that is a big trigger, is to do with routine and habit. So if you tend to binge at a certain time of day, when you get home, if you're on your own in certain situations, travel is a big one for a lot of people, this transitory eating, going from one thing to another. It becomes such a habit and a routine that when your circumstances look like this, the urge to binge is there and it's strong. And habits, they're really powerful. You know, we tend to think of them as, well, if you just wanted to stop enough, you just have to go cold turkey and stop habits. But I tend to think of it a little bit like if you were trying to pull up a plant from the ground. If you loosen the earth around it before you pull it out, it makes it much easier to do. So, you know, putting this on binging around habit, in order to loosen the earth around it, we are looking at changing the routine slightly. So if you always binge in your bedroom, or you always binge on the sofa, you have a place that you always binge, or even a seat that you always binge. If you normally sit at one end of the sofa, just getting yourself to sit in a different place is starting to loosen the earth. If you tend to, binge within 10 minutes of getting home, can you wait 20 minutes? And what happens in those 10 minutes? Again, we're just loosening the earth. The all or nothing thinking is going to say, no, I just want to stop. But what this does is it kind of brings you out of autopilot, but it forces you to bring some presence into what you're doing. And we can't change anything unless our attention goes into it. And a lot of the time we're getting blocked by shame because we're like, I just don't want to be doing this, so I don't want to be present. I want to be numbed out or unconscious of whatever it might be. So something about planning ahead, when you know that these times you binge and this is what it looks like, what could you do a bit differently to start to loosen the earth around it so that it's less on autopilot, so that we start to break some of those connections that when I'm in this situation, I binge, always and inevitably. And the last one, which probably deserves a video all on its own, and I will do one at some point, is that you have been triggered by an emotion. So this might be any emotion. It doesn't have to be what we would call a positive or a negative emotion. When it's driven by emotion, it tends to feel like the urge to binge just popped up out of the blue. It was just a moment. So I've got a really recent example of this in my life. So I recently went for lunch with a friend who's going through a very, very difficult time. And it was a really sad lunch. And afterwards I went to Sainsbury's to get a few bits. And when I was in Sainsbury's, I was hit, and it seemed to pop up out of the blue with this sudden urge to buy everything in Sainsbury's and to binge. I could see my old binge foods there. And in that moment, it felt like they were calling to me. And I kind of went into confusion, and I was taken aback by this feeling, this urge, because I don't tend to be hit with urges that strongly these days. And I asked myself, what's going on? Why am I feeling like this? And it came to me. I was like, oh, I'm really sad. I've had a very sad time with my friend, and I'm still carrying this sadness. And I wasn't even aware of it until I stopped and asked myself what was going on. And I thought, okay, well, what do I need to do with this? And I thought, oh, I need to cry. That's what I need to do. And that might be the answer for everyone, but it's what I felt right for me. And so I left Sainsbury's, and I got in my car, and as I was driving home, I had a little cry. And it was a really short one, maybe a minute or two. And the lightness that I felt afterwards, suddenly I didn't want to eat the entire contents of Sainsbury's. It was just gone. And I was able to make that connection between this emotion triggering this urge to binge. Because what would have happened in the past is if I felt sad and I wanted to, what I needed was to cry, and I would binge, afterwards I might be able to see that the sadness caused it, but then I couldn't get in touch with it. And I think that's what binging often does. When it's binging as an emotional response, it really is like you are pushing food down, you're pushing the emotion down as well. So after binging, you might feel pretty crappy, but it's really difficult to get in touch with the original emotion. And something that I find really fascinating is that dieting seems to cause emotional eating. A lot of people report that food didn't become this emotional crutch until they started dieting. There's something about this restriction, this trying to control food, setting rules, depriving, allowance, all that kind of thing that creates this emotional relationship with food. And the emotions and the food become confused and intertwined. And maybe it's because hunger and how much to eat is a feeling in itself. So when we start messing about with that, maybe we're messing about with our emotional lives in other ways that we don't realise. So these are the top 4 that I come across the most. Maybe you resonate with some of them. Maybe you've got another one that I haven't mentioned, and if so, pop it in the comments below. I'm quite new to this YouTube thing. I'm still figuring this stuff out, so any feedback or comments is greatly appreciated. Feel free to message me privately on Instagram or via my website, because I know that with a lot of this stuff, leaving a public comment, for a lot of people, they just don't feel comfortable doing that. And I get quite a few DMs with people sharing their experience, and it means a lot to me because it makes me feel like what I'm doing is adding some value. So as this is coming out, it is the 22nd of December, so it's coming up for Christmas time. So I hope you guys are okay with that. I contemplated doing a video about Christmas, but this was the one that I felt inspired to put out this week. So on that note, go well, my friends. Namaste.